Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for stopping by today. So I'd like to first take a minute to say hello to everyone and give some people time to join us. So let's see who's here. Jessica, hi, nice to see you. Sonia, you too. Yvonne, nice to see you. Thank you. Capri, thank you for joining me. John, oh, you've made every live. That's wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And from Ireland, wonderful. Hi, Carla. I'm glad you're here as well. Dexter, nice to see you. Goody girl, hi. How are you? Shirley, nice to see you as well. Hey, Diggler, thank you for stopping in. I appreciate it. Sorry, there was a bug on my camera. Mel Mac, hello, nice to see you as well. So let's take another minute or two to let people join in, and then we'll get to our topic today. And as always, after I discuss the topic, I'll be taking questions in chat. And any topic is fine. You can ask me anything, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. And what else? If you ask a question in chat, try to put the word question so that I think my blouse is crooked. Okay, so I can identify your question more easily in chat because I don't want to miss anyone's question. Hello, Jennifer. I don't know if I said hi to you before. So I think I got everyone. Shirley, hi. I don't know if I said hi to you. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you think my discussions are interesting. Thank you so much from Scotland. I appreciate that. It really does make me happy that I'm able to give you guys information that you find is useful. Hi, Mel Mac. Nice to see you as well. So hopefully some more people will join us, but I don't want to keep you waiting too long. Hi, Pauline. Good morning. Nice to see you. So everyone, hi, Linda. Nice to see you as well. Oh, I'm glad you like my advice. That's very kind of you to say. Everyone is always so kind in the comments, and I really do appreciate it. Really, I do. So nice for you to take the time to join me this afternoon. It's 3:00 here in Florida, and I know you're all on different time zones. So thank you for stopping in. So I'm going to go ahead and start the topic. And while I'm doing that, if you can think of any questions you'd like to ask me, we'll do that. Hi, love MJ. Nice to see you. I think it's evening for you. Good evening. Okay, so most of you probably heard about the recent murder in Florida, actually, of the 13-year-old cheerleader, Tristan Bailey. And that murder prompted me to do this discussion today. If you haven't heard about the case, the sheriff in St. John's, Florida, identified a lone suspect in her murder, and that is a 14-year-old eighth grader that attends the same school that this cheerleader does. And the medical examiner determined that the cause of death was sharp force trauma by stabbing, and the manner of death was homicide. There's no motive at this time identified or released to the public. And law enforcement is predicting that this 14-year-old is going to be charged as an adult. He did an adult crime, and they believe that he should be tried as an adult. So I thought it would be helpful if we had a discussion about the reasons why so many teenagers are killing other people, and go over some of the warning signs that can help us predict not only whether or not the teenager will kill someone, but that the teenager may even, in fact, grow into being a serial killer. I work with a lot of teenagers, and aggressive teenagers usually lack the social skills required to solve problems in an appropriate way. And they really have a lot of difficulty expressing their feelings. And most of them have a very difficult time taking responsibility for their actions. There are even a lot of adults that are unable to take responsibility for their actions. But teenagers, they're immature, and they typically have a short attention span. Their cognitive abilities are not yet developed. And the ones that go on to be violent typically prefer to associate with younger people than themselves. These teenagers, they are disruptive. They exhibit profanity. They'll defy authority. They do a lot of attention-seeking types of behaviors. And some of these teens may also go on to withdraw socially, isolate, and they may have feelings of inferiority and anxiety, and they're often oversensitive to any type of criticism or teasing by other teens or adults. Now, these are just some of the traits that indicate that they may go on to be exhibit violent behaviors in the future. Now, as we know, murder is one of the most serious of all crimes. And because of that, it's important for people to understand some of the things that help us predict and hopefully prevent extraordinary violence, like we saw in the case of this recent murder of the 13-year-old teenager cheerleader. Killers and violent teens do behave in a predictable pattern. And because of that, we need to have an understanding of the causes, the warning signs, and the triggers that are considered to be red flags that violence is imminent. So according to research conducted over a 30-year period by an individual named Phil Chalmers, 5 teenagers murder every day in the United States, and 12 teenagers commit suicide every day in the United States. Now, there are many causes and motivating factors that can lead a teenager to think that violence will solve their problems. And so we're going to look at some of the most common causes for teen violence, up to and including murder. The number one cause is the teenagers are in homes with no father in the home, or they have an abusive father figure in the home. Their home life is often unstable, and it typically includes physical violence, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, things like that. These teenagers are often victims of bullying, and that is really the number one cause of school shootings. These children or these teens are often obsessed with violent types of entertainment, including the video games that they play, violent music, things like that. These teens often become obsessed with deadly weapons, guns, knives, bombs, things like that. These teens often have suicidal ideations. They make statements that lead you to believe that they're thinking about killing themselves. Most use some type of substance, alcohol, drugs. They abuse medications like Xanax, etc. A lot of these teen killers want to be famous. They're often involved in gangs or cults or hate groups. They are easily pressured by their peers, and usually their peers are the wrong types of people. So they align themselves with the people that, or the other teens that are getting in trouble. Poverty also is one of the factors in the ingredients that sometimes lead to a teen committing murder. There's also a lack of discipline and spiritual guidance in the home or in their lives. And some do suffer from mental health diagnosis. Violent teens will display some kind of warning signs before they carry out their act of violence. They usually plan their violent event or their violent crime about 6 to 12 months prior to the commission of the crime. And sometimes there may be only one warning sign, but frequently they have trouble keeping their violent plans to themselves. Many of them tell other people of their intention before they kill. But there are some of the most prevalent warning signs that teen killers and school shooters may display. So it's important to know what to look for. Some of you are probably familiar with the top three, which is cruelty to animals, fire starting, and bedwetting into the teenage years. Some of the other warning signs that are very prevalent are that the teen will draw violent pictures. They'll take photos and post pictures of themselves displaying weapons. So they'll be posting on Instagram and Snapchat. They'll post themselves holding some sort of a weapon. Usually it's a gun. They'll also make verbal statements or hand gestures threatening violence. They also have, they'll draw violent or depressing things, and they'll write depressing narratives. And oftentimes those things, the drawings and their, quote, manifesto, is found after the commission of the murders, most prevalent in school shooters. They'll either post some sort of video or some kind of written chronology of their intention. They often post their antisocial philosophies online and in social media. They almost always have a fascination with weapons, with guns and bombs and knives. They're also obsessed with violent entertainment, including violent video games, to the point where some of them play these violent games up to 18 hours out of a day. You should also look for any change in the way that they dress, any change in their behavior or their peer group. And usually this change is often to a darkness, the dark side. So it's important to be aware if the teen starts, behaving in a dark way or dressing in a dark way. And another really key warning sign is that they have a fascination with other school shooters, such as Columbine, and they're also fascinated with infamous killers, serial killers, etc. Now, so those are some of the warning signs, but we need to talk about some of the things that will trigger the teenager to go from writing about it and drawing their violent scenarios. And then they'll move into what can actually trigger them. One of the causes or triggers is if they're suspended or expelled from school. Another trigger is if they're arrested. And it even can be a minor infraction, like a traffic ticket. Another trigger is some sort of dispute with their parents over things like cell phones or curfews or the amount of time they're allowed to spend playing video games. So there's some kind of conflict going on with the authority figure in their home. One of the biggest triggers is a breakup with a significant other. Their girlfriend dumps them or their boyfriend dumps them. Another trigger is a significant amount of bullying in school. And the last trigger is when the parent forbids the teenager from dating a particular boy or girl. So those are the 6 most prevalent triggers for violence that we see with teenagers. Now, there are a variety of questions that need to be asked that can help us identify whether a juvenile or a teenager has the potential for violence. And I'm going to go over some of those questions. The number one thing is, has there been some type of abuse or trauma in the teenager's life recently? Another question is, have they suffered some type of loss or death of a loved one? As well as, like I mentioned before, a breakup with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Are they experiencing domestic violence in the home, or are they witnessing domestic violence between the adults in their home? Another question is, are they involved in any kind of violent pornography or any kind of violent sexual types of movies? Are they drawn to those? Are there any signs of depression or thoughts of suicide, statements regarding suicide? Are they using drugs or alcohol? Are they involved in gangs or a cult or a hate group? Like I said, are they fascinated with weapons? Have they harmed animals? Have they tortured or killed any animals? Have they set any fires, or are they fascinated with fire? Are they still wetting the bed? Is there a history of suicide in the family, in their parent or their grandparent or their aunt or their uncle? And have they made any threats to kill anyone, including classmates or family members? Have they threatened to blow up the school? Have they turned in any homework or artwork that depicts any violence or depicts murder? Have they ever posted anything on social media pertaining to violence or murder? Do they have a journal that they write their thoughts in? And if they do, has anyone looked at it? Have you read it? Do they have social media accounts like Instagram or Snapchat? Those need to be monitored very closely. Are they fascinated with school shooters and serial killers? Do they collect books about violent or satanic or hate-filled philosophies? A lot of times these teenagers will draw swastikas, or they'll draw things that are satanic. Those are the dark things that we want to look for. Have they committed any petty crimes like vandalism or arson, or are they running away, or are they sneaking out at night? Are they in any danger of being molested, or have they ever been molested? Are they experiencing any types of abuse other than that in their life, emotional or physical? Have they become more secluded? Are they isolating in their room? Have they stopped spending time with as many of their friends? Or have they stopped spending time with family members? Have they stopped talking to family members? Do they do things that are considered self-harm? Are they cutting? Are they burning themselves? Are they dating someone older than them? What kind of friends do they have? Are they a bad influence, or are they a good influence? How much time are they spending away from home unsupervised? And the last thing is, have they ever been caught partaking in any type of voyeuristic or peeping Tom types of activities? These are all things that we need to consider when we're trying to determine whether or not this teen is troubled, so to speak. Now, there are a variety of strategies that you can use to help manage an aggressive teenager. one of the things that you can do is to expose them to more positive ways to expend their energies, like exercising, painting, running, playing sports, etc. It's also helpful to teach them how to problem solve so they don't choose violence as the answer, or gosh, God forbid, suicide. Most teenagers who get angry do have a good reason to be angry, but they almost always express their anger in an inappropriate way. So it's important to teach them how to resolve conflict and how to have honest conversation and discussion, and teach them how to compromise, so that they're not acting out because of all this pent-up anger. It's also important to encourage them to take time for themselves so that they're away from all the noise and the activity. There's a lot of pressure on these young people nowadays, especially with social media, because it's, 24/7 they have access to whatever's happening on the other end of their social media. So it's important to ensure that they do have some time. Turn off the television, take the video games, the violent video games, take them away from them. If you think that the teenager is becoming difficult or has a tendency to start to move in a direction where you think they may become violent. There have been many studies that have linked television, movies, and video games to violence, as well as hyperactivity. So, and it's not just the violent content of the video games and the movies, it's the barrage of stimulation that makes it hard for them to focus. And it's important for them to learn the consequences of violent behavior so that they understand that if they choose to be violent, that it's going to hurt their chances in life. It's going to limit their ability to get a good job. It could alienate friends, it could alienate families, and it could eventually lead to them being incarcerated. So make sure that they understand the reality of the consequences of violence. There's way too much glorification of the gangster type of mindset. So it's important that they understand that there are serious consequences that come with acting out in violence. And it's important to set very, very clear standards of behavior, what you will and what you will not tolerate. Make sure they understand that, although anger is a natural feeling and shouldn't be suppressed, it's the violence that's unacceptable under any circumstances. Now, let's move from a violent teen that we've been talking up to now about a violent teen. Now let's talk about how a violent teen becomes a serial killer and how an aggressive, violent teenager may end up to be a very cold-blooded murderer. And there are some very clear indications that this may happen that you need to be aware of. The very first thing that we want to look at is there some type of antisocial behavior? Most psychopaths have a strong tendency towards antisocial behavior. And so we need to watch for any type of antisocial behavior in teenagers, actually in children and teenagers. Now, some children do develop more slowly. So you need to take that into consideration as well. It's important to pay attention if a child regresses from being extremely social to extremely antisocial. The serial killer Ed Gein, he was the inspiration for the movie Psycho and for the movie Silence of the Lambs. The character Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And he had absolutely no social connections beside his extremely, his mother. His mother was very religious and very abusive. And if he tried to make friends, she would punish him. So after she died, he went on to become a serial killer, and he looked for women that looked like his mother, and he murdered those women. The second thing that we want to look at as an indicator that a violent teen may become a serial killer is, as I said, arson. Many serial killers start out as arsonists. They love setting fires. And the reason they love setting fires is because it gives them a feeling of power and control. And eventually that power and control is obtained through the act of murder. They move from arson to murder. Now, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, who was terrorizing New York in the 1970s, he was actually infatuated with pyromania or arson as a child, to the point that other children actually nicknamed him Pyro. And after he was arrested for the murders, for the Son of Sam murders, he took responsibility for dozens of arsons in New York. And he has been attributed up to 1,400 arsons have been attributed to Berkowitz. The next thing we want to look at is the torture or mutilation or murder of animals. This is one of the most significant warning signs that a teenager will become a serial killer. Children who torture or kill small animals like squirrels or birds or cats or dogs, and they show no remorse, they're highly likely to go on to be psychopaths or sociopaths. Serial killers like to control other people's lives. And as children, small animals are really the only thing they have any control over. They have any power over. Jeffrey Dahmer, another serial killer, he spent a lot of time in the woods as a child collecting dead animals to dissect. He was fascinated with the inside workings of animals when he was younger. He even went on to murder his own dog. The next thing we look at is a poor family life. Most serial killers do come from unstable families, and the families typically have some sort of criminal element, psychiatric problems, or drug or alcohol abuse problems. And serial killers most often have very poor relationships with their family members. And in some cases, their family members are their very first victims. Ed Kemper, another serial killer. He was the co-ed killer, and he killed his grandparents when he was 15 years old. And he was incarcerated for those murders and released at the age of 21. And one of the things that should have never happened with Ed Kemper was to release him into the custody of his mother. But they did, and he went on to kill 6 co-eds, 6 college students. And they finally caught him after he murdered his mother, his violent alcoholic mother. Another indicator is childhood abuse. Many serial killers are abused as children. And typically it's committed by a close family member. And when this happens, it instills in the child feelings of humiliation and helplessness, and feelings which they will later seek to instill in their victims. So they'll take that helplessness and humiliation and inflict it on their victims later on. One of the most famous female serial killers was Aileen Wuornos. She actually was killed on death row. She was abandoned by her mother when she was 4 years old, and she never met her father because he was in prison for sexually assaulting a minor. And so her grandfather took over as a caretaker of her when her mother abandoned her. And she ended up being abused by her grandfather until she ran away at the age of 15. And she went on to kill. She was a prostitute, and she went on to kill several of her male customers. And she was ultimately caught and sentenced to death row, and she did die on death row. Another indicator is substance abuse. Many serial killers struggle with drug and alcohol abuse. Jeffrey Dahmer, who we mentioned earlier, he began drinking in his teens, and he was an alcoholic by the time he graduated high school. And he ended up getting expelled from college and discharged from the military because of his alcoholism. Another indicator that we want to look at is voyeurism. Research tells us that many serial killers become interested in voyeurism. They're also interested in sadomasochistic pornography, like the BTK killer, and fetishism at a young age. And I don't know if you caught this on my last slide, but I am going to have the BTK killer's daughter on my channel. She's agreed to come on for an interview, and she's going to be discussing what it was like to be Dennis Rader's daughter. So we're going to be planning that in the near future. Ted Bundy was very infamous for blaming pornography for the reason that he became a serial killer and murdered so many women across the United States. When he was an adolescent, he would get drunk and he would go around his neighborhood trying to peek into windows to see if he could find any women that were undressing. So he was a voyeur at first when he was younger. So that's another thing that we need to look out for. The next thing is intelligence. Now, there are a number of serial killers that have an IQ that's in what we call the bright normal range. Organized serial killers, these serial killers are very methodical, like John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy. They both had an average IQ of 113. While most disorganized serial killers have an average IQ of 93. Ed Kemper, who I mentioned earlier, had an IQ of 136. An IQ of 140 is considered to be in the genius range. So Ed Kemper used his intelligence to convince psychiatrists to release him after he only served 5 years for the murder of his grandparents. He convinced them that he had been reformed, but he went on to kill 8 more women before he was finally rearrested. The next thing that we want to look at, the last thing that we want to look at is what we call shiftlessness. And that means that despite having a higher than normal intelligence, many serial killers have trouble keeping jobs, and they often work as unskilled laborers. David Berkowitz, after he got kicked out of the military, he had, and he also had above average intelligence. He held quite a few blue collar jobs, and the last job that he had before he was arrested for the Son of Sam murders was that he worked for the post office. The last thing I want to discuss before we go to the questions and answers is there are a variety of myths about serial killers that I would like to review with you, and so that you have a better understanding of what is myth and what is not. So the first myth is that serial killers are predominantly white males. That is not true. The majority of serial killers, up to 60% actually, are Black males. And that's over the last 20 years, the study was. The next myth is that serial killers kill within their own race. That is not true. White serial killers mostly kill white victims, but Black serial killers mostly kill outside of their own race. The next myth is that serial killers like to kill up close and personal, like strangulation. That's a myth. The truth is that 42% of serial killers actually shoot their victims. 22% strangle, 15% stab their victims, and 9% bludgeon their victims. The next myth is that all serial killers are men. That is not true. 7% of serial killers are female, and that amounts to over 300 female serial killers in American history. The next myth is that serial killers mostly kill female victims. That's not true either. In the history of all American serial killers, 51% of the victims were female, whereas 49% of the victims were in fact men. The next myth is that serial killers operate in populated areas like Los Angeles and New York. That's not true. The top 6 states to where you could be killed by a serial killer are California, Texas, Florida, Illinois, New York, and Ohio. Those are the top 6. The next myth is that serial killers rarely change their MO, which makes them easy to track and easy to arrest. That's not true either. Serial killers often change their MO, making it difficult to connect their crimes. But they rarely change their signature. The next myth is that there are a few active serial killers in the US at any given time. That's not true either. There are an average of 50 to 100 active serial killers in the United States at any given time. The next myth is that serial killers are mostly motivated by lust and sex. Not true. Most serial killers are motivated by anger. They're motivated by control and power and manipulation. The last myth is that serial killers are never released from prison or death row. Not true. There have been several serial killers that have been released from prison and they go on to kill again. There have been 20 death row inmates that have been released that did indeed go on to kill again. So that wraps up our myths and facts session. So now I'm going to go over to chat to see if you are still there and if anyone has any questions. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to the top and look for questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Okie doke. So if you have any questions, please type them in. John says, hoping Loki and Thor are going to photobomb. Oh, yeah, they are gorgeous. Thor's asleep under my chair, and Loki's out in the sunroom having a nap as well. So I don't think they're going to make an appearance, but you never know. Let's see. Yes, Loki talks a lot. Yes. And Thor is a fine bodyguard. Yes. Oh, hey, Gail. I didn't see you earlier. Yes, these teenagers do have similar patterns. And if you are aware of what they are, it's good, then you can raise a red flag. And it could be someone that you know, or a friend's teenager, or, just a neighbor. If you start to see these red flags, it's important that, you tell someone. Because they're very predictable. And the murders that are going on by these teenagers is horrendous. That's why I decided to do this today, because of that 13-year-old cheerleader who was recently murdered by a 14-year-old. Okay. Hi, Cup of Stars. Hi, Pauline. Hi, Mike Droppin' Mama. Thank you for coming. Are they born evil? That's a good question, Pauline. I think I've gone over this once before a little bit. Psychopaths are born, I wouldn't say evil, but psychopaths are born that way. In their brain, in all of our brains, we have what we call the amygdala. And the amygdala is where we have our variety of emotions, most importantly, empathy. Psychopaths, their amygdala is broken. It doesn't work. So either they're born with it already damaged, or they sustain some type of head injury that damages the amygdala. And so we find that in research of all the psychopaths. So they are born that way. Sociopaths are made by their environment. They come from very abusive environments typically, and they become sociopathic. There are instances, however, where someone is born with a normal amygdala, and they have the ability to develop empathy and caring for other people. However, the environment that they're raised in is violent and antisocial. So that's all that they see. And so that part of their brain, they don't ever develop any sort of empathy. They don't understand. No one teaches them not to hurt other people's feelings and not to hurt other people. So there are cases where the brain is normal, but they are antisocial and they become violent. Evil, I think a lot of crimes, particularly murder, is evil. And some psychopaths are evil, but there are also very successful psychopaths that are not violent. They're the ones that have positions of leadership. They're the CEOs and the judges and the politicians, and they're not violent, but they are indeed psychopaths because they don't really have any empathy. They'll step over anyone to get ahead. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so. Oh, mic dropping mom. She says she has 2 teenagers and it's the scariest thing you've ever done, watching and learning. Yeah, don't feel guilty. We do the best we can, and teenagers really do test our patience, and you have to be aware of what to look for and be nosy. Look in their room. I can't tell you how many. Well, for instance, the Columbine killers. There was evidence all over the place. They were writing about it and posting about it, and they had all kinds of weapons, and nobody looked in their room. Look in their room. Look at what they're writing, what they're doing. Be nosy. They don't like it, but it's important, because if you find something disturbing, you can do something about it. But if you don't know, you can't help. Pauline wants to know, is it a gene? It's not necessarily a gene, but psychopathy is inherited. So someone in their gene pool, in their family tree, was psychopathic. Cup of Stars, great question. Can this behavior be stopped, or is this an inevitable outcome? If you catch it early enough in the teenage years, or even in childhood, when you start to see conduct disorder or oppositional defiance disorder in children, you can intervene at that point and try to get ahead of it. It's important to identify the warning signs early, and that way you can intervene. It's not inevitable. I don't know if it's always preventable, but like I said, these teenagers behave in a predictable pattern, and understanding what you're looking at helps so that you can intervene. You have to take away those violent video games, limit their access to guns and weapons. you have to pull out all the stops if you see things that concern you. Not you personally, but if an adult sees anything of concern in a young person, make sure they're not abusing substances. Make sure they're not running around with the bad kids, getting suspended, et cetera, et cetera. There's a pattern, and some children demonstrate some of these bad behaviors at a very young age. The defiance and their refusal to respect authority. And that needs to be addressed and squashed at a very young age. Because if you don't stop a elementary school child from talking back or being disrespectful to the parent or any other adult, you will have an out-of-control teenager who is sneaking out and stealing your car. So you need to nip it in the bud when they're young. Thank you, Ronald. I am having a nice day, and I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Thank you. Mike Droppin has another question. Do you believe suicide is a hereditary trait, or more so the understanding of a different way out? I do know that research tells us that there tends to be repeat suicides in family histories, in family trees. There seems to be a link in the past of another relative that may have completed suicide. And I always encourage people, don't ever say that the person committed suicide. That sounds like they committed a crime. When someone kills themselves, they completed suicide. So they completed their plan, and they didn't see any other alternative. They didn't see any other option. The darkness, they looked into the abyss, and that's all they saw. And most people who complete suicide, they're unable to consider the wreckage that they leave behind, because their emotional suffering is so extreme that it's all consuming. And so they don't understand, or they can't see past that. If someone, particularly of young people, if the teenagers or the younger people are making suicidal statements, it's a fine line, because some of them do it to manipulate. And a lot of times they make those statements when they have gotten in trouble, when they've gotten suspended or caught doing something naughty. And they'll make that statement because they know that adults react to that very strongly. And usually it diverts the attention away from the bad behavior. But other times, if someone is making those kind of statements or writing those kind of things, then intervention is important, and it's key, because it is preventable. But a lot of times someone will act completely normal, and there's no sign that they're about to take that step, and it leaves people, the wreckage that it leaves people shocked. They didn't see it coming oftentimes. But hereditary, it can be, but usually the thing that's hereditary is the genetic loading for depression and anxiety, or any of the more serious mental illnesses like bipolar and schizophrenia and schizoaffective. So that's hereditary. So I hope that helps answer your question. Oh, Capri, you stole a pack of gum. Oh, you still feel bad. You have good conscience and a good moral compass. It's a good thing that you felt bad. Oh, Mike dropping, Mom, you stole your kindergarten hamster. Oh my goodness. That's so adorable. I hope you took it home. Okay, Mel Mac question. Can an internal head injury, say from a car accident, trigger this dark behavior? If it affected the amygdala portion of your brain, which is on either side of your temple, you have the amygdala is on either side of your head, about 1.5 inches in from your temple. So if the head injury impacted that part of your brain, it can change a person's personality. It can change their behavior. They can become aggressive. They can lose empathy. They can become violent. So yes, a head injury can indeed impact the way someone behaves. Okay. Oh, I already got that one. Hi, Lola. Better late than never. Kara says her parents got called into school. Brother's artwork was dark. Aw. Well, I'm glad it was talked out. That's the thing you have to do. If you see something that, you know, or the teacher sees something that's concerning, have a discussion about it and find out what happened. Why? Why did the person do that? Why did they draw that? What were they thinking? And Capri, I agree with you. There is so much more now that's triggering for young people with the social media. And, you know, before, I'm talking back in the day, you know, because I'm old as dirt. But back in the day, if you were picked on at school, you went home and it was done. But now these kids go home and it's all over social media. It is relentless. And so many of them end up completing suicide because of the bullying on social media. And some of these children or teenagers are so mean, and they'll tell the person, why don't you go just kill yourself? And, you know, it's really tragic. So you're right. It is. It's a lot harder now. Okay. Dexter has a question. What are your thoughts about a young Chris Watts saying prayers and Hail Marys in the bathroom? I think I've touched on this before. I think that he knew at a young age that he was different than other people. I think that he started to realize that he should be feeling like, say someone hurt themselves, and he sees other people reacting to that with concern and caring or upset in some way, and he sees that, but he's not feeling that. He doesn't have the ability to feel for anyone else. He had no empathy. So I think he did recognize early on that he was different. And I think that he is, in my opinion, based on what I've seen in his interviews, etc., that he is a psychopath. And I think it's was passed on from previous generations. And I think that he didn't have, he knew he was different. And we don't know what he was doing that he considered evil, that he felt he had to pray, you know, behind closed doors. It could be anything. He could have been masturbating and thinking that that was horrible, or maybe he was doing something antisocial, one of those warning signs that we talked about earlier. We don't know. There's no documentation or any discussion about that, but I do think he knew he was different. I absolutely do. And I think that's why he was praying behind closed doors. Your cat's hiding? Aw. I know my cat's noise makes a lot of your pets look around for the cat. Okay. Yes, Capri. Ed Kemper was very, very interesting. Do you know he was 6'7"? He's gigantic. Yeah, very, very big guy. I hope I'm not missing anybody's question. Oh, thank you, Ronald. I try to look okay for my age. Thank you. It's not easy. Amy, how nice of you. Thank you. That is so kind. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it costs a lot to feed Thor. He eats 99 pounds of dog food every 5 weeks. I have it on auto ship from Chewy. Yeah, he eats a lot. Not Loki. Loki doesn't eat a lot. Okay. Kara wants to know, am I familiar with James Fairweather? No. Oh, wow. He lived near you. No, I'm not familiar with that one. Mostly I'm well versed in the United States, the serial killers here, but I'll look into that. Sounds interesting. Oh, Sonia, that's true. Yeah, his college girlfriend dumped him. Yeah. I'm so glad she did, right? Yeah, he was a piece of work, Ted Bundy. Yeah, when he was killing co-eds and when Son of Sam was murdering people in 1974, 75, I was in my 20s. I remember them. Actually, I lived in Long Island when Son of Sam was murdering people, and he was targeting females with long dark hair parted down the middle, and so all of us girls would wear our hair up. We didn't color it because it wasn't done back in the day. Nobody colored their hair, just the older people. But we all put our hair up so we wouldn't be murdered by David Berkowitz, the Son of Sam. Hi, YT Kimberly. I'm so glad you have a minute to stop in. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm still looking for questions. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Thank you, Linda. That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you. Okay. I think I got everyone's question. If I haven't, please type it in and I'll answer it. I think it's very important that we get this information out. I do talks at all the local schools about suicide prevention. I meet with all of the seventh graders up to 12th graders. Once a year, I go to all of the schools and I do a talk on suicide prevention and warning signs, etc. And I really think that in addition to that, more attention needs to be paid to the warning signs of violence because there are just way too many teenagers that are violent and killing others, either school shootings or just murdering people like this recent one when Tristan Bailey was murdered last week or a week and a half ago. So I think conversations need to be had. I think parents need to be educated. I think that it's important to censor the music that they're listening to. I know a lot of the rap music is very violent, and they're glorifying the gangster type of mentality, and it's not good. Digler has a question. Could you explain the correlation between the absence of the father and why some teens end up behaving that way? The absence of the father, in particular for the males, the most significant role model in any child's life is the same-sex parent. And so if there's no father in the home, chances are the mother is working to make ends meet, which means that there could be a lack of supervision in the home. And a lack of supervision is not a good thing for young people, especially teenagers, because they can get into all kinds of trouble without proper supervision and rules and boundaries. And so the teens that have no supervision end up, it depends how they're being treated. If they're angry or feeling abandoned by the absence of the father. So, you have to look at the whole picture to be able to put the pieces together to see if we're dealing with someone who has the potential to become violent, or because there are many single parent homes where the children don't turn out to be violent. But then there are those that do. So it's a matter of looking at the whole circumstance, because in addition to not having any father in the home, oftentimes there are other extenuating circumstances, such as, poverty or, no spiritual guidance. Are they fascinated with crime and criminals? Do they want to be famous? That boy that killed this young lady, this cheerleader, you've all probably seen, he posted on Instagram a picture of himself in the back of the police car when they were taking him in for questioning, saying something like, "Hey, has anyone seen Tristan?" I mean, this is a kid who, in my opinion, is looking for the notoriety that came with the murder. So yeah, it's usually a combination of things. Hi, Ruth. Nice to see you. This is a good question. How many were released from prison who did not kill again? Oh, I'm sure lots. I don't have statistics on that. I wasn't looking for that in particular. And as far as getting tattoos as a teenager, an indicator. I don't think that teenagers are old enough to decide whether or not a tattoo is a good idea, although so many of them are getting piercings, etc. I know here in Florida, you can't get a tattoo as a teenager without an adult present. But I don't know how strictly that's enforced. It would depend also on the type of tattoo. If it's a swastika or something antisocial or satanic, that's a problem. So it would really depend on what else is going on with the teenager, whether or not that's something of concern. Me personally, I would not let my teenager, when I had teenagers, I would not have let them have a tattoo at that age. Dexter, good question. Why those states have higher serial killer rates? I think it has to do, honestly, one of the factors is temperature. It's the weather. Because if you notice, all of those 5 of those 6 states, except for Ohio, have pretty mild temperatures. I also think that they pick states where it's easier to be to go undetected, as opposed to murdering in a small town. There's mass transportation available. They can be in New York 1 minute and then, be in Florida the next. It's easy to cross state lines. I think that has something to do with it as well. But I think primarily it's the weather. Hi, Jane. Rainy England. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, here's one. Cup of Stars. Can the empathy or behavioral patterns be swayed a different direction if born with normal brain and they have been around domestic violence? Yes. Yes, it can be. The ones that are around surrounded by antisocial behavior, that, the things that contribute to someone becoming a sociopath, those things are usually very extreme. It's usually extreme violence and abuse and neglect and etc. The people who have the normal brain, that aren't born psychopaths, but they are in environments that are challenging, and they are around domestic violence and they have PTSD, they still have the ability to develop empathy, because hopefully they have someone in their life that can teach them, because we teach children to be empathic. We teach them, we don't want to hurt, so-and-so's feelings. And we start that at a very young age. Most children need to learn that A, we don't hurt someone's feelings, and B, we don't physically hurt people. And you can teach that, absolutely. John, do I think he possibly took part in animal torturing or killing as a youth? I think it's the ingredients were there for him, having no empathy, in my opinion, being a psychopath. Unfortunately, there's no evidence of that in any of the background information we have at this point about him. But I do think it's entirely possible that he was doing things that were antisocial, that no one knew about, hence the praying behind closed doors. It's entirely possible. Hi, Ridgeback, Grandma. You late, but it's okay. You made it. I'm just checking for any more questions. Hi, French. In the UK, you cannot diagnose a child until they are 18. However, the symptoms can be treated. For parents, it is a nightmare. So what can they do to push things forward? Wow, that's way different than the United States. I diagnosed children as young as 3 with different things. Children's personalities are not developed until they're 18, fully developed. And but at least over there, the symptoms can be treated. That's good. I don't know what you mean by push things forward. So I'm not sure what you mean. If you're thinking about what kind of things you can do to help minimize or mitigate what it is that the child is doing, what the behaviors are that you want to extinguish, then parents do have the ability to do that. It just depends on what behavior you're trying to address and extinguish. But being aware of the behavior, identifying that it's a problem is very important so that you can start to move towards figuring out how to fix it. Okay. Cup of Star says, so trauma caused brain damage. Can this be changed? Trauma as in emotional abuse or sexual abuse, that wouldn't cause brain damage, but blunt force trauma, like a blow to the head or a fall or a car accident, can cause brain injury. If the trauma is caused by some type of abuse that's not involved in actually damaging the brain itself, yes, it can be changed. Any kind of trauma that we sustain in life, whether it's physical or emotional or sexual, is stored in our body. And that's why we have PTSD, because the trauma gets stored and in our body, so that when we are triggered, the feelings rush back to us. And a lot of times with severe PTSD, the person will actually relive the trauma and have flashbacks and things like that, nightmares, etc. EMDR therapy is one of the more recent therapies for trauma, and it's very effective, and it helps disconnect the memory with the traumatic feelings. So it's not so much that we extinguish the memory, but we can unlink or disconnect the trauma feeling from the memory, so that the memory is more like you're objectively looking at it as like a movie, and it's not bringing a rush of emotion with it, and then the memory isn't re-traumatizing the person. But brain injury, when there's blunt force trauma to the brain, that can cause brain damage, and that is hard to recover from. And so it would depend on what the extent of the damage is and what part of the brain was damaged. Hi, Carla. Thank you for saying that. Can medication of any sort assist in successfully treating these issues if caught at an early age? Yes, they can. Especially if we have a young person, a child or a teenager who is having difficulty regulating their emotions, then we can medicate with a mood stabilizer, which often helps. It would depend on the diagnosis. Some behaviors are extinguished. Like say the child has ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. these children are very impulsive and tend to have very short fuse. They're easily upset. And when we medicate a child for ADHD, it tends to reduce the impulsivity. It tends to reduce the tantruming and the extreme reactions in their behaviors. So there are a variety of medications. One of the things that most people don't understand with teenagers is that anger is often displayed as a replacement for, not as a replacement. An angry teen is often depressed but undiagnosed for depression. And the reason for this is that anger is a much easier emotion to display in front of people rather than sadness. So we always want to look at, if a teenager is angry, we want to find out, is the teenager depressed? Because depression steals your emotions. It steals your sleep. It steals your appetite. And so the only emotion left, really, when a person's depressed is anger. And the anger masks the depression in teenagers. Not so much in adults, but it is very prevalent in teenagers to see if they're depressed. Typically, you will just see anger. But a depressed teenager who's angry does not often become violent like the teenagers that we were talking about earlier in my discussion about the ones that go on to become a real problem and murder people and become violent and later on, serial killers. Oh my goodness. Baxter got a Valentine card with a picture of another boy who wanted to date her with a knife in him and blood. Holy mackerel. Wow, I hope you had a conversation with that parent. That's not normal. That's not good. Mic dropping mom. Narcissistic abuse is the worst of its kind. It's probably, yeah, you're right. Victims of narcissistic abuse, because of the smear campaign that the narcissist launches against the person, typically leaves the person feeling at first as if they're the one that's the problem, that they're the crazy one, that they're the unstable one. The narcissist sometimes is very successful at convincing everyone else that the person being abused is the problem. And once the person starts to push back against the narcissist will accuse the abused person of being a narcissist. It's textbook. And so don't ever feel that you're being narcissistic for trying to extract yourself from a narcissistic relationship. So yeah, and you're right. You people who are abused have a lot of suppressed feelings and mostly it's helplessness. And when you're in it, it's hard to see how bad it is until you're out of it. And then you look back and you realize how bad the situation really was. It's very difficult. But getting out, getting away is the most important thing, because you can recover from narcissistic abuse, whereas the narcissist is never going to recover from being a narcissist. And narcissists really are very miserable people. Yes, anger is a secondary emotion, correct. Anger is usually displayed when someone's hurt, or sad. But it shows up as anger. Yes, Capri says getting away is the first step. Recovering does take time, but it's better than spending decades and decades and decades with a narcissist. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up, make sure I didn't miss anybody, because sometimes the chat just jumps and I miss it. It's not good, because I don't want anyone to feel neglected. I want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Diana, good for you. Good for you. It's good that you understand what you're dealing with, that you recognize the lethality of those people, that they're toxic and they're not good for you, and that you stop that cycle. Absolutely. Okay. Diana says adverse childhood experiences definitely shape the developing brain and anatomical structures. Exactly. You know, children are like a blackboard, and we write on their blackboard. They're like a blank slate. And so if they're being raised in an environment where the adults are yelling or violent or abusive or abusing alcohol or drugs, this affects them a great deal. And it's important for children that are affected by that type of situation. They can hopefully get into therapy and move past some of that damage. It's doable, but they have to get help because the environment is damaging them. Yes. John says, I love that you have a real experience to share as opposed to murderer fangirls. No kidding. You're very welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. I enjoy spending time with all of you. And I so enjoy sharing with you what I've learned over the years and what I've seen and what I've experienced. And it's about, I think the more we know, the better equipped we are to manage in this world. It's a difficult world. And there are not a lot of, let's just say there's a lot of bad elements out there. And we have to protect ourselves. And by bad elements, not only do I mean the criminal element, the sociopaths and the psychopaths and the murderers, but I mean the narcissists and the people who are irresponsible, who get behind the wheel and drive under the influence and end up killing a family by driving under the influence. I mean, there's so much that goes on, and it is a violent world that we live in, and you have to be able to identify the threat when you see it. You have to look for the signs that the person that you're dealing with is dangerous or a narcissist or toxic or looking to take advantage of you either financially or emotionally or any other way. So knowledge and understanding human nature, the good and the bad, helps you navigate the waters a little bit better, I believe. Okay. Domestic violence causes trauma, yes. And trauma causes brain damage. Brain damage in the way that, yes, trauma is stored in our bodies and in our brain. When we are traumatized, our body stores the memory incorrectly, and it links the memory to the traumatic emotion. And so in a way, it is brain damage. And the key is to unlink the emotion from the event. That's what we do in trauma therapy, or we try. Just checking again. Okay. I think I got everybody's question. I'm going to scroll back down to make sure. Oh, Cup of Stars. Oh, you're the scapegoat. At least you understand the structure, the dysfunctional structure in the narcissistic family system. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you don't have to live with those people anymore. Shanann, hi. I did a video on there were a lot of people who were speculating all of the unprofessionals that pretend to be professionals on the internet saying, or on the YouTubes saying that Chris Watts was, quote, Asperger's. And I did a video on the difference between a narcissist and autism. So I think it's one of my Inside the Mind of Christopher Watts. I think it's my third video in that series. And I go into great depth about the differences between autism and narcissism. So the only similarity is that people who are autistic, a lot of people think that autistic people have no empathy, and that's not true. They do. They are not able to pick up on social cues, on body language. And so it's difficult for them to master any kind of social relationship, or they struggle socially. Narcissists, on the other hand, and the most glaring difference is that narcissists, as we know, have no empathy. However, they're socially intelligent, and so they learn by mimicking what they see around them. So if they see like someone kicks a puppy, and they watch someone respond to that, the narcissist will learn the facial expressions and the words that accompany that type of thing and mimic it. Narcissists are very good at mimicking you. So that's why when you meet a narcissist, they lure you in because they're mirroring back to you everything that you're looking for in a partner. And none of it's genuine, but they're very good at the love bombing and the mimicking of social interactions. I've said this in another video. I think, if an old lady was crossing the street and she tripped and fell in the middle of the road, a narcissist would, if he had his own way, he'd walk right by and not give it a second glance. But because the narcissist intellectually understands socially what he should do in that event, he will go over and help the old lady to her feet and help her cross the street, because he knows that that's what society would expect. But the reality is he could care less if she got run over. So whereas an autistic person has empathy and they would care, they just have difficulty picking up on social cues, etc. So, but if you have a moment, check out that video, because I go into a lot of detail about it. Okay. Did I miss anybody? I hope not. If I did, type it right now so I don't miss it, and I'll try to answer it. And I hope today was helpful, and I'm so happy that you were able to spend time with me this afternoon. And I think next video, I will go into the metaphysical sciences a little bit, the paranormal, and I'll answer your questions about some of that. And Carolina wants to know, whoops, childhood trauma brought into adulthood. All the time, all the time. What happens to us in our childhood and in our past relationships, we carry that with us into our next relationship. And that's why some people keep picking the same wrong boyfriend over and over, or the same wrong girlfriend over and over. So you can resolve those issues. Absolutely. Childhood trauma is not a life sentence. And I've helped a lot of people through therapy move past those things. So even though we carry some of the wounds, they don't have to limit us or prevent us from having a full and happy life. Okay, and Cup of Stars has one last question. What percentage of children will become a narcissist with narcissistic parents? A great deal of children with narcissistic parents, particularly the mother, will go on to become narcissists. But it depends on the influence in the household of any of the other family members. Some families have children and the parent is a narcissist and none of the children become narcissists. So I'll have to look up the statistics of that. What the ingredients that create a narcissist when they have a narcissistic parent is the fact that the parent doesn't validate the child's feelings and emotions, and the child learns not to express them, and the child begins to create the mask that they wear as they become a narcissist, because they'll put on the mask of being the good child and only behaving in a way that the parent approves of, and that is the beginning of the child developing the mask, because they fracture in their minds, their emotions, they separate from their emotions because they're not validated at a young age. And so they put on this mask, and they go through life hiding behind the mask. So it would depend on the severity of the narcissistic parent. Is the parent a malignant narcissist or a lesser narcissist? And what is the influence of the other parent or the other adults in the child's life? If it's a strong enough influence, then the damage done by the narcissistic parent could be minimized. But if not, it could be a problem, but not necessarily. They don't always have to be, they won't always become a narcissist themselves. Diana says if they don't become narcissists, they become codependents. They do become people pleasers. Yes. Oh, Jan, that's sad. You hid your emotions when you were a child because you were punished and shamed. I'm so sorry. I hope you're able to move past some of that and resolve some of that wounding that you endured as a child. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I caught everyone's questions. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining me. And if you do enjoy my work, please like my video. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. And I guess that's it for today. And I'll see you guys probably same time next Sunday. Okay. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And I do appreciate everyone stopping by. I truly do appreciate all of you. If without you, I wouldn't even be on YouTube. I wouldn't even be doing this. So I really appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for listening. Okay. Bye-bye.